For 25 years, the state of New York paid me as a game protector, conservation officer, and environmental conservation officer. As the state of New York had no idea as to what their duties were, Governor Harriman hired the Pinkerton Detective Agency to find out. Well, they worked for about 3 months on all the game protectors in the state of New York. Finally, the report got back to Albany. They were a nice bunch of fellas. They all seemed to be going, doing, moving, looked like they knew what they were doing, but they never did find out what we were actually done for a living and what the state of New York was paying us to do for them. But then some woman would call you on the phone and say, "Are you the game warden?" And you'd say yes. And then the next thing she'd want to know, she was putting on a birthday party for some kid and wanted to know some good games for a 5-year-old. And after you got her straightened out and finally got to bed, some drunk in a bar at about 2 o'clock in the morning to settle some barroom argument would call you. Then he'd want to know something about the law or whatever. So you say, "Give me your phone number and I'll call you back." Then he'd give you a number and you'd say, "No, not the one on the bar, your home phone." So I always made it a policy to call him back the next morning about 2 a.m. when he was sobering up from a hangover. And that fine word got around and that kind of stopped that game. But apparently some people knew, maybe Albany didn't know what was going on, but some other ones knew what our jobs were. We always try to help people out to better places to hunt or fish or whatever. But we're never going to tell anybody what we've done for the state of New York. One time a fellow by the name of Royal Bevo came to me and he wanted to know a good place to hunt deer so he could go out the first day and get his deer. Well, it seemed Roy had 3 or 4 jobs all working at the same time and he didn't want to spend all the time hunting deer throughout the season. So Roy's a good friend of mine, so I told him a good spot. About 10 o'clock in the morning, I happened to meet Roy coming out there the first day, and his rifle's over his back, and his coat hanging half off his shoulders, got us nice and warm the first day of the deer season. So I said to Roy, "Any luck, Roy?" "Nah, that place ain't no good. Yeah, ain't no good." "What's the matter? No deer?" "Yeah, I see deer." "That ain't no good." "What do you mean ain't no good?" "You asked me and I told you where to go get a deer." "Why," he said, "you can't get no deer there. You just want to catch somebody, that's all." "All right, what the hell are you talking about?" You know, you just want to catch somebody." He said, "I said, what's the matter with you anyway?" "Why," he said, "them deer runs by there 6, 7, 8 in a bunch, right tight together, all bucks, does, and fawns, all tangled up together." And he said, "You can't shoot no buck without shooting a doe. You just want to catch somebody, that's all." Well, Louis Snub Archambault, it'd be nice to him. I asked him, I was duck hunting, one day. And, he said, "I've quit hunting ducks." I said, "Lou, I thought you used to be a good duck hunter." "I used to be," he said, "until my brother-in-law and his brother put me on a frozen mushrat house," he said, "up in the ling hole. They went away with a boat early in the morning," he says, "and about 10 o'clock, the mushrat house thawed out," he said, "and I sunk in, hollering and yelling and shooting the shotgun off," he says, "and nobody come. And finally, I'm up to my chest," and he said, "I figured that was about the end. I couldn't get out of there with hip boots on, sunk in there, full of water. Can't get out." So he said, "I promised the Lord," he said, "I would never, ever hunt ducks again if I ever got out of this mess." He said, about that time, he says, one of the section crews happened to be going by on a railroad. They saw me out there. Finally got some ladders and ropes and stuff, got out on the thin ice, he says, and finally got me out of there. And that's the last time I ever hunted ducks. Old Mrs. Adams up on Black Point and Lake George, south of Ticonderoga, had a porcupine crawl up underneath her automobile parked there along by the road and near the woods, Anyway, the porcupine chewed all the wiring off the car, chewed the hoses on the radiator and everywhere else. Well, the old lady, she was only about, I don't know, around 85, and she started for Ticonderoga next morning, and she didn't get very far when the water all got on that hot motor and shorted everything all out. Steam coming up on her there, and well, anyway, half scared to death. And they had a man come up and he towed the car down and rewired it. Cost her about $55. So she called me and I went up to see her, and I said, all right, Miss Adams, I'll have the Bureau game come over. And so I contacted them and going to accept the porcupine for her. Well, they went on with all that nonsense about an unprotected species and all that. And therefore, they wasn't going to trap the porcupine. And you just imagine the mess I'm in trying to tell her that that porcupine with 95 million quills is unprotected, and she didn't quite believe me. Finally, the porcupine chewed up the neighbor's truck. Had all the wires off his thing, and it cost him about $55. And finally, he took care of the porcupine. We're going to school down the State Police Academy, and this guy came over and we started talking. And he would tell me all his trials and tribulations when he goes in a bar, goes to a party or whatever. Somebody finds out he's an environmental conservation officer, and all they want to do is talk hunting and fishing all night and ruin his evening. Well, I said, if you want to have him give you the fisheye and look at you sideways and say no, 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 and walk away, just say, I am the secretary of the New York State Gay Liberation Movement, and if you want me to, I'll put you on our mailing list. I guess he misunderstood me a little bit, and he gave me the fisheye, looked at me sideways, and said no, 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 and walked away. One time we're up stocking the Meadowee River trout. We had a nice bunch come in from Bath Hatchery, 3- and 4-year-old rainbow trout. Well, Joe Levette was a colonel in the Army, and they get to fish here and there and all over. And he was fishing up there with his brother-in-law, and he says to me, do you ever fish the White River in Arkansas? And I said, no, Joe, I never got out there to fish that. Oh, he says, you ought to try that. Boy, he said, that's one of the best rainbow trout streams in the world, he says. Well, I said, Joe, as long as you're going down here to fish, I said, why don't you and your brother-in-law take a couple of tanks of fish down? Well, we was using these backpack cans. Oh, yeah, they would, so they each loaded a can on their back. Of course, the guy had the big truck, and he was loading the fish in, and the covers, when he lifted them up, you couldn't see what was going on in the truck. Well, anyway, that big pool there is below Sheehan's, a big steep bank. They dumped the fish in down there, and they couldn't hardly no more than run up that hill to get back and tell us that we were stocking bigger rainbow trout in the Meadowee River than they were catching in the White River in Arkansas. One time going along the road with a state car, in uniform, working, something hit the outside mirror of the car. Well, with bifocals on, you miss a lot. But anyway, I knew something come in the car, but I couldn't see what it was. Well, I was just about by Willis's greenhouse when you're going into Hudson Falls. I kept on Route 4 South, and when I got down just about where Airlines is, in Hudson Falls, Airline Motors parts place, a bumblebee stung me way up inside on the groin on the left leg. He must have put about a quart in there. Well, anyway, I pulled right in there, jumped out, took my hat, and I banged him 4 or 5 times and walked on him. I ran into the store. I asked the man in the parts place there, Winchell, if I could use his back room. He said, yeah. Well, as I was going through the door, I took my gun belt off, and I got my jackknife out and threw this belt up on some boxes there, and then I dropped my pants down and squatted down to look underneath the groin as far as I could to scrape that stinger out with a jackknife blade. About that time, a guy came in from the other room, and he hollered, no, 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 the restroom's over there, the restroom's over there. Well, I was hunting over in Hampton there, Horace Seeley, and he ran into me and wanted to know where was a good spot to get a deer. So I told Horace that right in that field, that there was a little trail up through, and every night I used to see a nice 8-point buck come out there. So I told him, I see, ask Harry Vladeck, he's right there, he's loading him manure in that spreader, and more than likely he'd let you go hunt. So, okay. So I drove on, and anyway, Horace asked him, and he went up and hunting there. And about that time, he was back out to the road, and Harry come with a manure spreader, and he said, I thought you were going to hunt. No, he said, I already got my deer. He said, in the game warden down there, and he said, I don't want to get in trouble by taking two. Well, anyway, Harry kind of berated him for hunting anyway after he took his deer. No, he said, went right where he told me, and there's that buck coming right down the road to me. So he says, and I have had a heart attack, so I can't move the deer. So he said, I need some help to move it. Well, anyway, Harry helped him. He said, oh, you'll get some meat. Yep. So a couple of days I got a call from Harry, wanting to know who that fellow was. And well, I told him, I said, he's a nice guy, he won't cause any trouble. No, he said, I want to send him a card. He said he left about a bushel of meat all cut, wrapped, and tagged, and all ready to go in a freezer. He said, I'm going to send him a card and invite him up and hunt anytime he wants on my property. There's all kind of hunters and fishermen and trappers out there. One day I come along the road, and there's a rifle laying in the middle of the road, loaded. It seemed like a couple of fellas had come out of the woods, and one of them put the rifle on top of the car, and then got in the car and drove away. The rest of them, the rifle slid off and out of the ground, never missed it, till they got to the next place they were going to hunt. Another time I stopped some hunters in the middle of the night. They were out jacking rabbits. And they had a whole bunch of rabbits in there, some dead and some alive, hopping around the back seat, trying to tell me they're just trying to get enough for Christmas dinner. Another time, another hunter was out, leaning up against a tree, smoking his pipe. And every time he took a puff of smoke and blew it out, his buddy shot at him. 3 shots, no hits. And finally, one of the guys said to him, hey, wasn't you worried? And he said, nah. He said, I know, that was so-and-so shooting. He said, he can't hit nothing anyway. Another time I was going down the stream and fishermen that day, and all of a sudden I hear a screaming and cursing and swearing and yelling. Well, anyway, I got down there, and there's a fisherman. I guess he'd been reading too many hunting and fishing magazines. Well, anyway, I asked him how he got in that fix. He was there with a lure stuck in one thumb and in the finger of the same hand. Well, he said he'd been reading about these bow and arrow casts with a spinning outfit, and so he thought he'd try it when there wasn't anybody around. Well, apparently he held it by the body of the lure, and when he released it, immediately the lure moved forward at about 80 miles an hour and drove the hook, one into each thumb and forefinger on the right hand. I guess that cured him of bow and arrow casts and reading those lies in hunting and fishing magazines. Another time I was working over on Lake George. Of course, I had a good state motor leak, nothing but gas and oil all over it. Checked this fisherman, and he's complaining about the gas and everything else running out, the oil getting in a lake. And I don't know, he was German or Polish or Russian or whatever, but he had a thick accent. I guess he fell off the boat about a week or two before, and he's trying to tell us, he said, us Americans, he said, should be able to afford a better outfit for that than I had to patrol this lake, he says. Another time, a guy was fishing intently up there, about half a mile from where the old German fellow was trying to tell me about us Americans. But anyway, This guy was fishing in perch, and he's got intent what he's doing and watching. He's catching perch, catching them, putting them in a boat, catching them. And all of a sudden, he happened to look up, and a rattlesnake had crawled off over near Odell Island and into the boat, and there he is in one end and the rattlesnake in the other. I don't know how he ever did make out. I guess he made out all right. Another time, I ran into an old man. His name was Williams. He lived up in Dresden. And old Slight had made a fish trap for him. Now, that'd have been a nice thing in the lake. An old blind man putting a fish trap in. He'd probably never find a fish trap again. Another time we come along a lake up farther north than that, and there we met a judge over in Warren County. He's fishing in Lake Champlain, and with a couple of other fellas. So anyway, I said, look, I have a fellow, that judge, after we left, Oh, he says he's a great guy. He went on and told me all about him and everything else. I said, he's a bandit. Right underneath the boat, they're fishing, and he got a great big fish trap. No kidding, yeah. So anyway, we went back after they'd left and took their fish trap and dumped the fish out and got rid of that thing. Another time I come along, it was about 2 foot of snow back in the woods, quite a ways. And there come out an old trapper. He was trapping beaver. And, of course, some of them have a habit of setting a trap on their thumb, on their knee. Yeah, anyway, I guess he set it on his thumbs all right because he was cold or whatever, and he was tired. And the trap came back and got both thumbs when he went to set the pan. Well, anyway, there he was, hooked with both thumbs and with a chunk of telephone wire run out in the bottom of the pond with a big rock on and 2 foot of snow, and he can't stand on the trap to springs to get his thumbs out, and there he's trapped. He was tickled to death to see it came word. He says, I'd have been even tickled to death to see the devil to get me out of this mess. One evening, the wife said, now if you're going up by the creek, she said, look for Jimmy and bring him home for supper. I said, all right. So anyway, as luck would have it, I was coming by the end of Markham Avenue, and there comes Jimmy with a paper bag and a fish pole, and got him in the car, and he showed me the fish he got. Great big bass, weighed about 5 pounds or more. So anyway, I said, Jim, it's a black bass, the season's closed on it. Well, the guy he told me it was a black bass, but he didn't tell me the season was closed. Of course, Jimmy was only about 8 then. So he got home, he showed his mother, and she's tickled to death, and the next thing was that I said, you got to go down to Fred English. He's the judge, and they said he took the fish illegally. Well, one thing and another. I said, well, put some water in the bathtub, and if the fish come through, we put him back. If he don't, well, down to Fred he goes. My wife chewed at me all during supper and fought and argued with me. Well, anyway, after supper, the bass was swimming around. So he took him up to Mud Creek Bridge, and who was up there but Gummy Rich and Bob Belden. So we got out of the car, and Jimmy had the pail, and oh boy, that was a nice one. They were tickled to death to see that fish. Big one. Well, anyway, Jimmy went over and dumped the fish back in. So what's happening there? Well, he said Jimmy got the fish, and it was illegal, and so he's putting them back. Yeah, but he said the kid will never catch another fish as big as that in his lifetime. But then coming to find out, when Jimmy was coming down Markham Avenue, some guy come out of the house, everybody's looking at the fish. He said to Jimmy, just a minute, kid. He went and got a paper bag, and he put the fish in. He says, you take that fish right home now. He said, don't you show anybody. He didn't know his kid's old man was the game warden. Another friend of mine, he decided he got a couple of deer skins tanned, and he had himself a shirt made. Oh, beautiful shirt to hunt with, like the Indians had, a buckskin. and it was dyed, red, so he could hunt deer and everything else. Oh, he put it on and went hunting. Well, everything went along good. And of course, apparently he didn't have anything underneath it, only that shirt and his hide. So when he come back from hunting that day, there he is. He's sweated quite a bit and everything else. The buckskin was wet, and he was a little damp from the sweat. And the next thing was he had to have a jackknife to get the shirt off because he couldn't get it off. Another mighty hunter. I'll shoot everything, Don't make any difference, season or no season. Hawks are protected in New York State, federal law, state law, and all states have it. Well, anyway, he saw this hawk up on a high tension line. Nothing to do, but you got to shoot the hawk off. Well, he come pretty close. All he done was cut the wire, drop the wire down, set the field on fire. Seems like anywhere you go, you run into somebody that knows somebody or something. Well, anyway, my brother-in-law died down in Queens, so I had to get down for a funeral, down at Beck's Brothers Funeral Home. And these couple of young fellas, and they were acquainted from up around Loon Lake and Chestertown area, and they'd questioned me on about who I knew and so on. I told them. And they farther about the job and what do you do and so on. Well, I explained to them, they had to know who's related to who and why and how, and because a guy in the city that may live in an apartment, he's out jacking deer, but he shoots a deer and he takes it to his uncles, cousins, grandfathers, or aunts, or brother-in-laws, or something. So anyway, finally, in the course of talking, he said, I married a girl from Queensbury. I said, yeah, whereabouts? Oh, over on the Bay Road. What's her name? Walkup. Oh, I said, yeah. She related to Monahan, Stiles, and so on and forth. And yeah. You know the family? I said, no, only back as far as John Grout. I can't seem to get any farther back in that family than John Grout. Well, anyway, he says, I don't recognize that name. He said, he said they gave us a genealogy of the family when we got married, he said, but I don't recognize that name anyplace. You going to be around here for a half an hour? Yeah, I'll be around here till we bury him. So, okay. He went home, got the genealogy and brought it back, and he said, that John Grout came to America in 1636, and they can't trace their family history back any farther than that. That's the first entry in the book. And that's right where I left him hanging. He probably thought I had a brain like a computer. I had to remember everybody who they're related to in the whole country up here. But anyway, I saw that genealogy long before he ever met that girl. And my ancestors goes back to the same John Grout. One other time I was working in the Moose River Plains area. It just opened it by the state for wilderness deer hunting. And that guy come up to me and he's mad and he's chewing. Who do you write to? Who do I write to? Who do I write to? And he's chewing and stuttering and spewing. And I said, what's the matter? Well, he says they promote this wilderness area hunting, he says, and what do I find? He says picnic tables, fireplaces, outhouse, even an outfit to come down and pick up the garbage. He says they're talking about wilderness area. He says, I don't know where they got wilderness area here. They check for loaded guns in the Moose River area. So I come along, there's a guy with a little sports car and he's in there. So I got out and checked him. And he didn't have any loaded gun, but not only was the gun unloaded, but it was all taken apart. And there was one of these new automatics, and I don't know, I never seen one like it before. But anyway, he'd had it all apart, down underneath the bucket seats, in the cracks and crevices of the seats, and I don't know that guy ever got that gun back together, because I don't think he could find all the parts. The state used to send us in there to work, and this was a Harwood camp, and it was a private camp before. The state had bought 54,000 acres from the Gould Paper Company to make this wilderness area on a forest preserve lands. Well, anyway, it was a log cabin and bars on the windows, big ones, 5 strands of barbed wire around the camp. All three of them were electrified to keep the bears out. Well, anyway, if the thing ever caught fire, they never got out of it. And there was an awful lot of it to work out of. We used to have a lot of lost hunters there. And every little while, one of them would come out here or there. And 54,000 acres is a pretty good chunk, plus the private lands all around it. I used to have this old lady in my section. Every little while she'd write the department having a soup or something or other, but she'd have hallucinations back up on a mountain. But anyway, she kept writing in, and you got about 15 letters to write and investigations to make and everything else. Well, anyway, I used to go up quite often to see her because of these letters. So anyway, I found out she's like interested in geology and rocks and so on. So every time I went up, I'd talk rocks to her, and I'd bring her a few samples and so on, and that kind of stopped the letter writing. But anyway, I brought up some fossils one day and left them there to her. Well, it seems her granddaughter come home from college, and they were studying fossils in college, and she was going to take those to college and have them identified. They got there, and they looked and looked, and they couldn't find nothing. There were fossils they had never seen before and had never been identified. Well, anyway, they all come off Thorn Hill over here in Hampton. Apparently, that's the first chunk of underwater to come out because a guy from Harvard finally came up and made his college thesis on those fossils in Hampton on Thorn Hill. He said none of them had ever been cataloged before, and they'd never seen any like them before, so they had to give them all new names. There was an old fellow by the name of George McDonald down at Saratoga. He used to be the ranger down there. Well, anyway, he was over fishing Sacandaga area. So, anyway, he asked the game protector over there where the good place to fish. So he said, well, follow me. So they took the snowmobiles, went down the lake, and they made a great big swing and then finally into a bay. So on the way out, they made the big swing and coming home. And the next week when they were going fishing, old George said, well, there's no need of going way around there. So he cut right straight across, and in the snowmobile went. Apparently it was spring hole or something in there. Thin. There George went in. He was an old man. He was way over 75. Can't get out, can't swim, and he's swimming, but he can't keep up the swimming. So he said, well, what the hang. So he threw up his arms and figured that was the end, and he was going to sink. He wasn't going to suffer any longer. So he went down to just about shoulder height, and feet hit the bottom. And a couple of springs, and George was right up on the ice. Probably about the handiest thing a hunter can take. Take a deck of cards when he goes hunting or back in a wilderness area that he is not acquainted with. Then if he gets lost, he can just sit down and play cards and a couple of hands of solitaire. And about by the third hand, always somebody will come along and say, play the black queen on the red king. Then you can ask him how to get out of there. It seems my sister-in-law got caught by state police 10 miles over the speed limit coming through Fort Ann one day. And, well, anyway, she didn't want to. She wanted to see the judge, but she didn't want to pay, and she's protesting and arguing and talking to the judge and back and forth and hemming and hawing. Well, anyway, finally the judge says to her, are you any relation to that game protector up there by the name of Brooks? And she says, yeah, that's my brother-in-law. He says a good thing he didn't get you because he brings them in there. It costs him $400, $500, $600, $700. She paid the $10 and got out of there quick. Another time, a 14-year-old kid, he was going to get his first hunting license, so he saved his old man some money by buying a combination. Never realized until he didn't have to have the fishing license part of it until he was 16. Another time, a couple of pike paddlers over on South Bay, they're out there paddling pike. Well, anyway, This is before my time, but game protectors are right there to grab them when they come ashore. Well, it's clay and slippery and mud and whatever. And the guy in the bow of the boat, he jumped out on the rocks and broke his shoulder, and the other guy jumped off the back of the boat and into the South Bay. And old Joe Webster, my predecessor, said, "Come ashore or I'll shoot." And the guy out in the water says, "You'll have to shoot, Joe. I'm stuck in the mud." Another time, I was working the Moose River, and this guy come down the road. He's flagging us down, and so finally he's all excited, and finally we get out of him that the bear, he's got in his car, he left the window down, the bear was eating his lunch. And he didn't know what to do. He was all shook up. And Jack Carroll said to him, "Well," he says, "you got a big game license, did you?" "Yeah." He said, "You got a rifle, did you?" "Yeah." He said, "Why didn't you shoot the bear?" He says, "Season's open." The guy said, "I never thought about it." Speaking of bear, I used to go around the schools and have a Smokey Bear suit on and go into school and talk to the kids and so on. But I could always pick out this kid or that kid, and because he looked like his father or mother that I knew years ago, and I went to school with him. Well, anyway, and it gave the kids quite a charge talking to Smokey Bear. Well, I don't know what happened, but apparently I was just leaving the school, and one of the lower grades was getting out about the same time. And there was about 25, 30 kids around there, and all talking to Smokey and everything else. Of course, with that Smokey Bear head on, you can only look out straight. You can look down a little bit, but you can't see very good out of it. Well, anyway, apparently it was a kid by the name of Ross, Vic Ross or somebody from up there. He had a lunch pail. And he said, he ain't no bear. And he swung the lunch pail and caught Smokey between the knees and his belt buckle and almost floored poor Smokey. Of course, you meet all kind of people on this job, too. Years ago, I gave a direct transfusion at Glens Falls Hospital to a woman. She had to have a spleen removed, and they had to have the warm blood to give to her during the operation. So anyway, they call me, and got out on 3-4 list, on the Red Cross list and the Doc White's list and the Legion donor list and the Glens Falls Hospital list too, and they really drained the blood on me over the years. But anyway, so a few years after, I'd met her husband and down the street, and we were visiting, talking, and well, he said, "Brooksy," he said, "I can't talk to you any longer." He says, "Some of my friends," he said, "will see me talking to you and think I'm trying to give you some information." To this day, they never thanked me or said, "Well, give up your day for going down and helping us out when we needed it." Another friend of mine, of course, conservation officers don't have many friends in the Bureau of Game. But anyway, this guy's about 5'2" or somewhere, and he come home, works in the Bureau of Game, and he come home, give his wife a great big kiss, and he said, "You couldn't guess what I'd done today, honey." No, she guessed it. No. Well, anyway, he gave her another great big kiss. He said, "You couldn't guess what I was doing today, honey." No. Well, anyway, she couldn't guess. A couple of more kisses, and then she kind of got white or something. She said, "What have you been doing today?" Well, he said, "I gave a bear mouth-to-mouth resuscitation." Bureau of Game traps these bears, and then they the culvert tile, and then they give them a shot of chloroform, take the bear out, weigh him, check his age and teeth and condition and everything else, and then put the poor bear back in a culvert tile and haul him somewhere and dump him out. Well, this poor bear, he didn't quite come to fast enough. So they dragged him out of there anyway. Then we got the bear. They didn't know what to do, so this guy decided, well, he'd give him mouth-to-mouth resuscitation. Apparently it worked. The bear come to and they took off. show you what directors of the Bureau of Law Enforcement thought about the Bureau of Game and all those other guys from other departments. One day they're going along and one of the conservation officers shot a rattlesnake. And the director threatened to fire him right then and there. He said, you know, if you let that snake live, he says he might get a biologist for us. A couple of protectors working on a salmon running up the streams of Lake George, you know. Of course, there's a lot of camps and things around Lake George. And some of these streams are right close to the camps. Well, anyway, these two protectors on one side of the stream, and they happened to look over, and they could see this guy there. Had his arm up, you know. And, well, anyway, nothing to do, but they're going to grab him off, and they run all across there. Both got wet. Anyway, they got over where it was, and it was somebody's driveway, and at the end of the driveway, there was a tin policeman holding his hand up with "Stop" painted on his belly. He wasn't a hunter, but he was a fellow who worked where a lot of hunters were, and they were talking hunting and deer hunting and deer signs and deer this and deer that. And well, anyway, finally got to him, and at that time he didn't have to have a course in hunter training. You just wouldn't get a license. Well, Nick went in and got his license, and he went up hunting. And well, he got about back of Browns here, about 3 miles south of Whitehall, and he started looking and got about, he was about half a mile up in the woods, and he looked over to the right, and the deer sign pointed right up towards the same direction. He said, well, that looked like about the same direction I'm going. And so Nick took 4, 5, 6 steps more, and then he checked the sign again. He looked back over, and the sign was gone. Finally come to him, that was a deer. There wasn't no sign. So I don't know if Nick ever did find out about what deer signs look like. Another time was working fishermen in the wintertime and going up through Putnam, and just over the line in Essex County, there's a chimney fire. Well, I work with Bain and Gould, and both volunteer firemen in there, gung-ho to put out fires, you know. All these volunteer firemen, they got to have a fire or something. So anyway, hunted around, I got a little ladder, and Gould run up the ladder, and Bain run up the ladder, and then put the ladder up on the second story from the roof up to the main roof, and Gould run up that, and he got on the roof, and then Bain took the ladder down, because he'd on the first roof, and put it down to me. He said, get some water. Well, I run around there, the thing, in the wintertime, everything froze solid, and I don't know. Well, anyway, he says, get the fire department. I said, okay. For some reason or other, I laid the ladder on the ground, and jumped in the car and drove away, and got the fire department from Ty to come down, and then they come back and want to lick me for taking a ladder down. I said, well, I didn't think he was going to need it, and I didn't want you to get lost. I wanted to be there when I get back with a fire truck. Another time I come along, it was chimney fire. This was the summer. It was a couple of miles from the same place. So anyway, the woman had a garden hose there, and well, I can't get the garden hose to squirt up in the top of the chimney, and the ladder don't begin to reach up there. But there's a clean-out hole in the bottom of the chimney. So I said, well, maybe I can do this. Open up that clean-out hole, and I stuck the hose up in there, squirting that up to the bottom of the fire. Maybe I can put the fire out. All I done was put out about 75 yellow jackets come out of there. And I left that and called the fire department. These fellows over south of Whitehall here, up over Brick Church Hill, they had a hunting trip all planned, and so anyway, but for some reason or other, well, they thought they'd bring their wives over so they'd all visit, but their wives were bringing their guns. Well, anyway, they guys didn't want them to hunt. They weren't going to take all them women with them. There was 4 hunters, and they left their wives home. So a while later, I come along, and there's a nice buck in the tree, so I got out, check it, and noticed the hair all off the back, right down the middle of the back, no hair on it. So I talked to women, and I said, how did the hair get off the back of the buck like that? Well, she says, didn't have any rope, and we didn't do this, we couldn't pull it, and so she says, each one of us got a leg, and we dragged it that way, backwards. Well, that answered that. So anyway, their husbands all come home later. They had nothing, but the women had a nice buck. Worked on Lake George with a big boat. We used to leave down the Hall's boatyard at the south end of the lake. And I worked with this guy, and he was grumbling about this or that or something all the time. He would never seem to be satisfied. So one day we were in Halls, and they were needling me and him, and kidding around. And I said, well, how does it look when they're going to come out in the newspaper when the crew on the Conservation Department boat mutinied and threw the captain overboard? Well, anyway, they got a big laugh over that. So then, every little while they'd say, when are they going to mutiny? They're going to have the mutiny. Well, anyway, we had to come along, and Murray met another protector up there that was off on vacation, and it wasn't too far, but there was a violation that the Water Resources had to come and look at. So Murray says, you take the boat back to Halls and gas it up and go on home, and I'll ride back to my car, he said, with the guy from Water Resources. Okay. So I come back and gassed the boat up and tied the boat up to Halls. And when I was going up through it, he says, where's Murray? I said, up the lake. Where? Up the lake. That's all. I just kept right on going. Next morning I come to work, and Murray is there, and he's mad, and he's about to lick me right then and there. He says, what did you tell him that for? I said, I didn't tell him. What? So he said, you threw me overboard. I said, I never told him I threw you overboard. They want to know where you were, and I said, they were up the lake. That's all I told them. You were up the lake. Right to this day, I think them guys in Hall think I threw them overboard. Another time the boss from Gloversville, George Rivenberg, and another protector were working up north of Warrensburg. Well, I had to go in the office for some reason or other, and they heard me on the radio, and they called me up to where they were working. And I went up, and there's a car parked there, and a set of snowshoe tracks going off into the woods. Anyway, so they had me, what do you think? So I looked in the car, and well, I said, no, he's all right. Well, he's up there hunting deer, or so-and-so, or whatever. And I said, no. I said, he's a Christian timber cruiser with a wife and 2 kids, a boy and a girl. And they started needling me and giving me the business, and nothing to do, but they had to wait. Sure enough, when the guy come out, he was a timber cruiser. And after he left, he said, how do you know he was a timber cruiser? Well, I said, I could see all the Vermont rules and Doyle rules and international rules for measuring logs in the back. He had a Bible, a lunch pail, and there were 2 kids' toys in there, one for a boy and one for a girl. He says, well, I guess you're right. He says, we never noticed that. A bear showed up one day, right during the big game season. He was just south of those gas tanks there between Comstock and Fort Anne and Route 4. But the bear went between Route 4 and the canal. He was there for quite a while. A lot of hunters come along, spectators and so on, stood there and watched that bear. That bear happened to be in the southern zone. No open season for bear. And he spent maybe half an hour or more there. And when everybody finally left, he took off and went back across the road, which would have been legal to shoot. But apparently nobody just dared to shoot him because there were too many other people there who had probably turned him in. Another bear we had, he got in a tent over on the east side of Lake George, near the Knapp estate. Well, anyway, of course, I was working with Murray there, and we were by the boat, and he said, yeah, He's a year and a half old male bear. Of course, now the bear was in there during the night. Now, he was not there till the next day. But Murray put him right down. He was a year and a half old male. Up, he knew exactly his mother and father and the whole family, I guess. But he got in and done a lot of damage, so they had to trap him and move him out. Sure enough, he was a year and a half old male. I don't know how Murray knew him, but that's what he was. Well, this little old lady had something bothering her stuff in the garden. Anyway, she said I have a heart trap. Alice Finn, she lived up on the top of the mountain there, going in the Hewletts. Well, she happened to catch a skunk. Well, anybody ever caught a skunk and have a heart trap knows you just keep pulling in stuff, pulling in, grab everything you can and pull it in and underneath him. Finally, the trap gets full. He's right to the top. You can't get any more, but he's there. Well, she can't get the skunk out of the trap, so she called me. And I got up, and there he is. He's sitting on about 6 or 7 inches of packed hard stuff that he pulled in, and I can't open the trap. And, I started shaking and the stuff out and poking it out, and I keep shaking, and finally I got the trap open and dumped the skunk out. Yeah, that skunk no more than hit the ground, and he sprayed me right from my shoes to my necktie. Beautiful yellow stuff. Well, anyway, I got back in the car and I started for home. Come down, up over old Stone Crusher Mountain, and Dave Sawyer saw me coming, so I stopped. And of course, I had the windows all down so I could breathe in there. Dave stuck his head in the car, and we visited for, 15, 20 minutes. He never mentioned the word skunk at all. I don't think Dave could smell a thing. Walt was quite a sportsman. Come home one night, and his wife had an awful backache, complaining of crick in the back. Well, anyway, Walt had some horses, and he figured the horse medicine he'd made up was all right to use on his wife. He said it was good enough for his horse, it was good enough for his wife. But anyway, he said he rubbed her all down nice, he says, and she had a black nightgown on, a little lace on the top and a little lace on the bottom, he says. And I rubbed her all up and down good, he says, and shoulders and back, he says, and done a good job. Next morning, he says, he hopped out of bed and stretched, and she says, well, Walt, my backache's all gone. And he looked at her and he said, yes, and so is your nightgown. He said she stood there with just that little bit of lace around the top and the shoulder straps. These two fellows were friends and hunted and fished for years and years. And I don't know how true the story is, but anyway, I'll have to call one Jim and the other Dick. It seems that they were down hunting ducks down a ling hole and had a small blind, and they'd shoot the duck and they'd go out and get the ducks and bring them back, and they were taking turns. Well, anyway, seems Dick had stepped in a pothole out there. It's all clay and all the lake and the bottom, and kind of treacherous. Some fellows use skis or snowshoes to walk around there with hip boots and retrieve their ducks if they didn't want to use the boat. But anyway, apparently he's just walking out there with his hip boots on. Got stuck. Can't get out. And anyway, he hollered to his partner, and he finally comes over, and he's helping and working and sweating, and they're up in the years, around 60. And well, anyway, they just can't get him out, and he's in sinking deeper and deeper, and both of them sweating, and he's in pretty well over his shoulders. So anyway, the other guy takes his shotgun and he points it at him. He said, I hate to do it, Dick. He says, we've been hunting and fishing buddies for years and years, he says, and if I go to get help, he says, you're going to drown. He said, and I can't get you out, and I don't want to sit here and watch you suffer. The only thing I can do, he says, is shoot you. And he says, put you out of your misery right here and now. He says, and by the time anybody comes back, you'd be sunk anyway. So anyway, the other guy starts crying and begging and pleading. He says, just one more chance, just one more chance, just one more chance. He says, we're both all in. He said, I can't help you. He said, we've done the limit of what we can do together. So anyway, with the one more chance, he come right up out there and into the boat. But for some reason, I don't understand, that ended the hunting and fishing trips of those together, that is. Yeah, well, you can probably get stuck in the mud in Lake Champlain area, but you can stuck over in Lake George, too. And it seems that this fat lady was going over into the $1 Million Beach on Lake George Village and had to go through the turnstile. Well, anyways, he got him halfway through and got stuck. And they try to get her out. They're pushing and pulling and then back and forth and hemming and hawing. And well, anyway, they can't get her out to the turnstile. Well, one of the special protectors or special patrolmen there worked there, John Dalton from Whitehall. He says, "Well, we'll hook a chain on there." And she misunderstood him. All he wanted to do was put the chain on the turnstile and pull it over to get her out. And she called him a whole bunch of names and told him they weren't going to hook no chain on her. In recorded history, it tells about one of the first log cabins on South Bay, where the housewife threw a week's supply of bread out the upstairs window to feed the wolves so they'd go away. Years and years later, the land is still handed down to the same family. I got a call from this woman, and apparently some wolves had tried to get her chickens. So I went over to shoot the wolves, if I could. Come to find out, she'd come out and put a broom and put the run to the wolves. Jason is tougher than the old pioneers. We happen to be in different towns working here and there. Once in a while we'll get a fire, and each of the towns have volunteer fire crews. And so we go, if we're near the area and can make it, we try to help them direct traffic or whatever we can do to help the fire companies. We come to this town and everything going along good. The fire crews got out there in the chimney fire. But it seems that they all have to put in some alcohol in those pumps in the wintertime. The guy stuck the hose down the hole or the top of the chimney, and he said, "Okay, turn it on." And he pumped about 2 or 3 quarts of alcohol down there. They exploded and opened up all the flue holes and whatever, every room. But back years ago, where every room had a stove in it, and clean that chimney right out pretty good, and fill all the room full of dust and soot and everything else. From now on, they squirt a few quarts over the edge of the roof before they put the hose down the chimney. Seems a hunter come up from New Jersey and hunting around the Argyle area someplace. He had a loaded gun in the car, and the gun went off and shot down the transmission. Automatic transmission. They put the car out of commission, so they hauled it over to his garage to be repaired. The guy went back to Jersey. They said they had the car a week or 10 days, and he could pick it up then. And that was a big joke around Argyle that Bain didn't get that guy with a loaded gun and all this, and they thought it was a big joke. So anyway, the guy came back from Jersey and picked his car up, and he said, well, they told him how much the price was and so on. Well, he said, I'd like to drive it down the road, he says, and around a couple of times, he said, and see the transmission working okay. Yeah, well, okay, go ahead. The guy took off, went back to Jersey. There's a case when, if it had let the game protector know, he could have settled the case for loaded gun to car, and they would have had the guy's name and address so they could have collected for the transmission they didn't get for it. Yeah, I was working with Jerry Gould down in the southern part of the county, and he got a lot of deer all over. And so anyway, we decided we're going to work on this bunch of deer in this field, and so we got to find a place to park so we can observe the deer, and also cars coming up and down the road and so on. And well, we're moving around there trying to find a good location, and finally a woman down the street, down the road from there, and I hollered, "Get out of there, you sons of boop, 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 and leave those deer alone." They were on her land. She didn't know we were the game protectors going to protect them. One of my neighbors known to take a drink or two once in a great while. But anyway, he was quite a fisherman. But it seems, that he lived on the main highway. And between the main highway and the sidewalk, there was some potholes. And he tried to get the state to fix them because it was a state highway. Tried to get the county, he tried to get the town, and he tried to get the village. And Nobody seemed to have the time or inclination or whatever to fill the potholes. Well, anyway, he come home with full of Coca-Cola or something this day, and in the house, he put it under his hip boots, and he got his fly rod out, and his tackle box, and his creel, and his hat with about 13,000 flies on it. He went out there fishing in those mud holes between the road and the sidewalk. Well, he didn't fish too long before it almost caused 4 or 5 accidents. And immediately, he had the state crew, the village crew, the town crew, the county crews coming from every direction with gravel and sand to level those water holes out. It seems the railroad had cut a lot of trees and along the railroad right away on Lake Champlain, on the southern end here, and dropped them in a lake. Just dropped them down, and it's all marsh through there anyway, and rot, and go back to methane gas again. So anyway, a local duck hunter was down there, and he walked out on it, and a lot of bubbles coming up, and decided he'd light a cigarette. Just immediately when he flipped the lighter, that methane gas caught fire, and he almost fell in the marsh. Got a call to go to Lake George, north end. Some guy had killed a sea monster there in the lake, and they come up near his dock, so he dragged that out. Printer done in by the time he got to him, he told me. He says, but you still had quite a lot of life in him. He threw him up on a wood pile and give us a call. And I got over there, and he had about a 6-foot lily pad root. I hate to hit anything with a car driving along the road, but one day between the barn and the house, this cat ran across the road. I mean, I swerved and missed him, but anyway, apparently I hit him and rolled him over, and I saw him get up, and he ran up and back of the house, and so I stopped, went up and see the farmer, his wife there or somebody, and she come to the door, and I told her, I said, well, I just hit one of your cats. I don't know whether I killed him or not. She said, you wait just a minute. She said, I got 4 or 5 hit more, and you can run over them too if you wanna. 4 middle-aged women down in Hebron picking dandelion blossoms. Apparently they're going to make some wine. Well, anyway, I stopped to ask them about making the wine, out of dandelion blossoms. Jim Walsh next door here was always going to make some dandelion wine, but he never had a recipe. So anyway, I asked them women, and they didn't say nothing to me. They just jumped in the car and took off. And they kept right on going. And there were a couple more guys over the Bees Hog down Dude Ranch, and they both had brand new Jeep station wagons. Well, anyway, with the Coca-Cola and the beer and the shots and whatever, they got an argument who had the fastest Jeep. And they're going to have a Jeep race from Bees to Fishbrook Pond and back. Well, anyway, both guys started out at a dead run with their Jeeps, and of course that road has been logged and ruts and road washed out and everything else. Well, anyway, one would get hung up, the other guy would help him, and they'd go on again at breakneck speed up and down a mountain, tip him over. When they got back to Bees, they had 2 brand new Jeeps that were a total wreck. I don't know what they told her wife or the insurance company. Old Charlie's butler's wife used to train beagle hounds. And anytime anybody ever asked her how she trained the dogs, she said, well, the first thing you got to do is know more than a dog. Well, anyway, several dogs I know always got their buddies in trouble. A friend of mine, Charlie, he'd come home, I don't know, his wife hollered at him for something, and he raised his voice to his wife, and his big Weimaranean hound bit him. Then Brian had a coon hound here at the house, and the boss come over one day, and the dog bit the boss. Well, it's going to get rid of that dog. So I told the guy that he's the best coon hound in the whole territory. So, well, he had more dog than he needed, he says, and he didn't need any dog. But he knew a guy would want one. So, call him, yeah, he'd take him. Met him about a week later. He said, "You weren't lying to me about that dog." He said, "He's the best coon out in the country." He said, "You can hear him for miles around. Driving along the road," he said, "you can hear him going and going and going." Well, anyway, I never knew the dog to get a coon, but or tree one either. Then he said to me, "You know, that dog won't swim." I said, "Yeah, he swims. He's in the canal all the time." Well, he said, "We're going to use him for a swim dog at these coon dog trials." He said, "You know how it works?" I said, "Yeah. Well, they got a raft and a car motor, the transmission, and a cable on the raft, and a coon in a box in a raft, and they threw him across the pond." Well, poor Arnie come out of the cage there and watched the coon go a couple of times, and he always went right across the same place. So from then on, Arnie would run right around the outside the pond and meet the coon when he got to where he was going. Working down in Saratoga County, going down south of Saratoga on Route 9 one night, I could see all the taillights going on ahead of me. They were going on stoplights and the cars ahead of me and swerving and back and forth. Well, anyway, I got down there and there's a drunk in the middle of the road walking down the road. So I stopped the car and getting out. And my partner lived down there and he gave me a hard time. He said, "It's none of our business." He said, and he went on and gave me all this hard time about none of our affairs. It's up to him and to leave him alone. So anyway, I finally got the drunk out of the road, and over the side of the road, and got the police down there to take him home or wherever to help the guy out. Come to find out, he's some great big shot politician, a heavy taxpayer in Saratoga County. I don't know how justice is, but the boss or the partner was promoted 2 grades, wound up to be the captain. Well, it always seems like I'm in a soup or just getting in a soup or getting into something I ain't supposed to be in. But anyway, I'm over in North Granville and a little bridge there to below Tyler's store. And the highway crew had replanked the bridge, took all the planking and threw them down the Meadowee River and put all new planking on the bridge. Well, anyway, I happened to come along. It wasn't my section, but anyway, I made them take all the planks out. Well, they tore them all back up and piled them underneath the bridge and set fire to them, and I guess the fire a little bigger than they thought. It burned up the new planking on the new bridge. I caught up Route 4 one night below Fort Edward, and just before he got to that bridge, there's a bend to the left. Well, anyway, there was a college student going up to Vermont somewhere, back to college, and he'd come around there a little faster than he's supposed to and hit the guardrails and keeved the bumper in and the fender onto his wheel. Well, anyway, he come right around to the left, and there's a little parking lot in there. Just lucky he didn't go in the canal, but he went in a little parking lot. So I come give him a hand, and come to find out he's a Japanese kid. And he probably were trying to take the jack and put it on the wheel and jack the bumper out and jack the fender off the wheel, but the jack don't want to work. The kid got mad. He said, it's probably made in Japan. Stock on the Pattenkill River was a little different than most rivers of stock. They used a boat, and both ends of the boat were dry, but they had water wells in the center of the boat, 3 or 4 of them, and you would fish in them, and you'd be able to fish out of there and into the river. But the river is kind of swift in the springtime, and someplace you're doing 10, 15, or 20 miles an hour, but that's pretty good with a boat with just 2 guys with oars and trying to dump fish in. Sometimes a boat swings around and you're not heading you're head downstream, but you got to change ends, you know. Well, anyway, trees down and different things. Just my luck one day that the boat swung around and that I'm not in the front anymore. I'm in the back end of the boat. Went under one of those trees, and next thing I'm in the river, gun, hat, the whole business. Another time we were working with the state police. Had a kid lost, about 4 years old, and been out all night. And can't find the kid. So, anyway, I happened to find a footprint of the kid. And who comes along but the bloodhound with the state trooper, and I go in the wrong direction. I pointed at the trooper and I says, "There's the footprint was going the other way. Can't help that. That's the way this dog is going. That's the way they went." Another time this bird come up to me. He figured he was all dumbbells, or whatever. I don't know. He had a bass. He called him a smallmouth bass, and he wanted me to certify it for the whaley contests. Then he got mad at me because I wouldn't no cat. It was a 47.5-pound striped bass that come out of the ocean. If he'd have entered that fish as coming out of the ocean, he might have won a contest. But don't bring me no striped bass and try to tell me it's a smallmouth. One day, Tom Callahan and Murray Cordell patrolling Lake George. They see this little guy over on the rocks fishing, and well, they don't know if he's a kid or whatever, but he said a lot of hair on his chest anyway, so anybody with a lot of hair on his chest, he got to be old enough to have a fishing license. He stood over there and he had a little red shorts on, and he's fishing. So they go over and get up close, and anyway, they come to find out he's an orangutan. And Murray don't want to get involved in that, but Tom is quite interested to see that orangutan fishing sunfish in Lake George. Anyway, the guy explained to him how he trained him into orangutan was fishing. Apparently he didn't need no license, but they didn't arrest him. Jim Crowder was a judge in Fort Ann, and he had a kid working for him who wasn't too sharp. Well, anyway, Jim had him and the team, and they were over in the back and going to get a load of hay or something, and the deer over there. And Jim said to the kid, he said, "You go back to the house and get the gun and we'll get him." The kid said, "No, no, no, no." Jim said, "Yeah, go ahead, go ahead." "No, no," he said, "that guy will be here in 10 minutes. "No, he won't know anything about it. We're back here, nobody knows nothing. Go get the gun." The kid, "No, no, no. He'll be here in 10 minutes. The kid wouldn't go get the gun. Well, anyway, just luck would have it. I drove in the yard, and around the barn come the kid, and Jim found him driving a team. And the kid stands there pointing at me, and he hollering, "See, see, 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 see." And Jim sitting on the wagon there laughing his head off, and it's about 15 minutes before I can get the story out of Jim as to what happened. I guess the kid knew more about what was going to happen than the judge. Another time, two brothers not too far from there were dressing off a doe out in the barn. And his sister finally come out of the back there and hollered out to him. He said, "The game warden's there." And they said, "Send him out," figuring that she was kidding, because she didn't like him shooting deer. Well, anyway, who was it but old Joe? And he went out and he said, "Don't skin no more on that deer, fellas." Mario LaPena from New York City bought a abandoned farm over in Pike Brook area between South Bay and Lake George. The ink wasn't dry on the deed before an old Indian showed up and demanded to know what Mario intended to do about the Indian burial ground. Well, anyway, Mario was all shook up and didn't want to start any Indian wars or anything else. So he says, "I didn't know there was one here. Don't tell me where it is. I don't intend to look for it. I am never going to cut the trees or mow the hay in the fields. I just want to fix up the house a little so that I can live in it after I retire." Mario lived there for over 25 years and done just as he said he would. Never saw the Indian again or heard who he was. Lowe was quite a deer hunter and sportsman for years and years, but he had a leg off, and so he'd go out in some field and sit there and have the gun just outside the car where he could get out and shoot a deer if he saw one. Well, anyway, they'd always tell him where to go here or there, and they'd fix him up at a good spot. Well, it seemed Lou never got a deer. But they said to him, well, you want some fencing, Lou? Oh, yeah, he takes some fencing. So he took they gave him a nice package of fencing. He took it home. What is it but a neck roast? Well, everything went along pretty good. And he's over there next day or two, and oh, no more deer. But anyway, then another package of fencing. Lou got it home, and another neck roast. Well, this went on 4 or 5 trips over. He said, I thought you guys got a deer, but he said apparently you must have got a giraffe. Another mighty hunter out hunting pheasants. Dog put up a hen. Of course, they're illegal to shoot, and anyway, he shot the hen anyway. Down he come, and the dog went over to retrieve it, and about that time the hunter saw the game protector coming, and so he went over to grab the dog and put the dog under his coat and the pheasant and everything else. And 200-acre cattails is kind of hard to find a man hidden down in the brush with the pheasant under his coat. But the dog forgot to stop wagging his tail, and he kept hitting one cattail. Then all the game protector had to do was follow and over and put his hand on him. He said, I'll take the hen pheasant now. Another mighty hunter complaining that he never had a chance to shoot a deer. He'd hunted all over the countryside. So anyway, I asked him, I says, you always hunting that corduroy suit? Yeah. Well, I said, you get rid of the corduroy suit, and maybe you can get within a mile of a deer, because every time a stick is, it goes zip, 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 or whatever. Old man Moyer was quite a fisherman and hunter. He never volunteered any information on nothing about hunting or fishing or anything else, I guess. One day the school principal had to come up to see him, and old Moyer was mowing weeds along the side of the road, about a half a mile from his house, and he stopped and he said to him, he says, can you tell me where old man Moyer lives? And so he pointed across down the road there to a house that he could see in the distance, and never told him that he was old man Moyer, but also he never even told the principal that his car was rolling down the hill and by itself. Over the years, everyone has heard of Split Rock Mountain between Essex and Westport. Well, anyway, the Indians all figured it was a magic spirit or something there and they threw up appeasements when they crossed that line on Lake Champlain, and they had to either go north or south of that. But north end of it is a rock that goes down the lake, and they call that Split Rock, and they call the whole mountain Split Rock, and everything's Split Rock. Well, anyway, I was working Split Rock one day, and I was going down a ledge on the north side of the snake den, and to go walk out on a cliff there, I decided I'd go over and see what I'd look like down through there. And I went to step across a crack. It was about a foot wide, and hey, I could look right down about 300 feet on a loose rock down below me, and I still had about 15 feet to go to the edge of the cliff. And I looked, my heart come up on my throat. I looked to my right, and up there and to the left, and that crack ran up and down that thing for as far as I could see. Now, that is Split Rock, and that impressed the Indians, and it sure impressed me. A few thousand ton of rock with no visible means of support floating in space. Louis, a friend of mine, was telling me about a moose hunting trip he took one time up in the northern part of Ontario. Louis, they call it talker, and he's a pretty good hunter too. But anyway, he said the worst hunting trip he'd ever been on. 800 miles one way and nobody to talk to. Years ago, when the automobile first appeared, they no longer needed horses because everybody was getting a car, and they were cheap then. Therefore, no horses, no manure pile. The pot under the bed no longer used either. No manure pile to dump it on. outhouses were just coming into being. My father was a high schooler at the time, and he built several of them around Port Henry where he lived, and he was asked by this neighbor to build one for him. Oh, he told me he'd build a nice one, he said, with a large hole for the adults and a small hole for the kids. The proud owner wanted to be the first to use it. He went in and stuck one leg down each hole and did his business and left his signature on the floor. He came out and he complained to my father that one hole was kind of small and had trouble getting his foot out of it. One of my neighbors asked me to get him a snapping turtle or two because he wanted to make some turtle chowder. So he dressed them off. The kids were all hanging around there. And he cut the head off the turtle. And anyway, the kids are poking at it with their foot. I could see him. I said, "Don't put your foot in there, Emmy, I'll bite you." And they knew better than that, and they kind of gave me a simple look. I said, "Well, if you think I'm kidding, you get a stick and put it down near that turtle's head and see what happens." So they tried that. The turtle's head jumped and grabbed the stick. A couple of days later, another neighbor, he had cut the turtle's head off and left it there. Apparently a rat had come from someplace, and the turtle's head jumped and caught the rat. Then there was a couple of guys in a bar down at Waterville. They had some turtle stew in a bar, and they were telling how big that turtle was. That turtle had a head on him bigger than a coffee can. Well, anyway, with a few beers and whatever, they had to go out in the backyard in the bar and dig it up. In the examining the turtle head, the turtle head bit the 3 fingers off the guy. Straightened that drunk out. I poisoned the fish in Fishbrook Pond with rotenone. And anyway, a worker dressed off 14 nice big perch there, about a foot long each. And he had a sheet of tin and he cooked them all. And it was about enough for one apiece for the whole crew, you know. Roy Smith and I were there, and he was a ranger, and he kind of figured, well, he's going to give us each one, you know, to try it and show us it wasn't poison, so you could eat them. We had our own lunch anyway, and he didn't say anything, but he ate the whole 14 perch and never did offer anybody any fish. Another time I was up in Dresden. I had to see Frank Barber, the judge up there. And come to find out there was a state trooper in there, and he had this guy and arraigned him before Frank Barber for bigamy. Well, the judge set a date for the guy to be back there for trial, and so anyway, the guy said, well, he said, I can't make it that night, Judge. I can't make it. He said, what do you mean you can't make it? Be in here. Oh, no. He said, I got to get married that night. The trooper was arraigned him for 3 previous marriages and no divorces. Another time, years ago, we worked 7 days a week. We had to steal the time to go fishing or whatever. Jerry Gould and I, we decided we were going to go smelt fishing up to Lake Champlain, up to Westport. Well, anyway, we went up to Young's Bay, north of Major Lee's Lighthouse. Fishing night, so we had a light and, underwater with a 6-volt storage battery then, and a headlight bulb from a car, not the big ones, but a little smaller light that they used at that time. And we fished there for quite a while, and nothing, no smell. Normally there's tons of smell in there. So anyway, the light was down about 30 feet deep, and there's about 130, 40 feet of water or more there. But anyway, Jerry at about 20 yards one side of the light, and I am about 20 yards the other side of the light, on the opposite side. And out of the deep water come something, and it blocked the light out completely, and we could see him drift down the other side. Anyway, whether that was a Lake Champlain monster or a small fish went over the top of that light, I don't know. Whatever it was, there wasn't any smell in there. We never did catch one. We spent all night fishing. We never got another fish, or not any fish. Only saw the shadow of that one thing, whatever it was. One time at patrolling Lake George, we caught this fisherman fishing, no license. And he's kind of put out and angry and mad and mean, and he's a son of a gun. Well, anyway, he finally come out that he was a surgeon. He said, I'd like to have you two birds on an operating table back in New York City. I'd fix you guys. I've been leery of surgeons and hunting fish ever since. One time a guy called me and asked if we were going to be home. Seems that he'd passed the conservation officer's exam. I'd say, yeah, I'd be home. So he come over and talked and wanted to know about the job and this and that and the other and around and took up about 4 hours of my time. But anyway, I finally asked him, what do you got for a mark from the test? He said he got 56. I gotta punch him in the mouth. If he'd got 96, he might have had a chance. And then they wasn't too sure about that either. Another time, we got a commissioner, Reed, for environmental conservation. And he hired one of them hippies out of New York, a woman. They're gonna clean up the environment. I don't know, I had to go to a meeting, and in some way or other I had to sit near her. Dirty hair, dirty fingernails, and dirty sweater, and dirty shirt, and dirty clothes. They should have cleaned her up before he tried to clean up the environment. We had another secretary, Bureau of Game up there, Warrensburg. She had a habit of, when she talked to you, open her eyes wide and roll her eyeballs around every direction. I don't know if she ever noticed it or not, or knew what she was doing, but she rolled her eyeballs around, her eyes wide open. And I worked at Murray, quite a horseman, and he said, I don't like her for some reason. I don't know. He said, I don't know. He said, I just don't like her. Something about her. I said, Murray, I said, the trouble is you've been around horses too long. I said, when a horse opens his eyes wide and rolls his eyeballs around, I said, you want to give him some room because you don't know if he's going to kick, bite, or walk on you. And he says, that's the story with that secretary. I knew there was something. Jake Sabo was Uncle Buck. He was a local violator. I never knew him to hunt or fish illegally. He always wanted to do it some other way. Well, he needled me, I guess, and told me how he got away with something. He told me during the Second World War, he was down the lake, dynamiting fish. He put in a pretty good charge of dynamite, and he says, and rode over in the weeds and got over out of sight. And he said the dynamite didn't go off, and it didn't go off, and he waited, and waited, and it still didn't go off. And finally, he says that I heard a boat coming, a yacht coming down the lake, he says. And then he said, I hope it didn't go off. I hope it didn't go off. And he's sitting there hoping, and he said, luck would have it. He says, the boat got right over the charge of dynamite, and he said it went off. Lifted a boat up about 2 foot out of the water. And he said they run up from underneath there, he says, below deck, and shut it off, and run around and look here and there. He says, fish all over. Yeah, he says they examined everything, and finally he said they took off. They probably thought they hit a mine, he says, but by the time I got out there and looked, he said there was nothing but a bunch of sheephead with their lungs all blown out, floating there. Later I was working with 2 other protectors, and this pickup come down the road. And I let the pickup go by the first guy, and the next guy stepped out about 30, 40 yards down the road, and who was it but Uncle Buck? Well, anyway, so he stopped. Of course, he had a guy walking in back of him with a burlap bag full of pike that he just paddled. And, well, anyway, of course, Uncle Buck figured he was in the clear. But anyway, he accused us of putting that one pike in his back of his hunting coat. We took the whole business and settled him and the other guy. And Uncle Buck had been mad at me ever since. Later on, I talked to the guy that had the bag of pike on his back, and I said, well, when you run into the brush? I said, when they stopped Uncle Buck. He said, well, he said, I would have liked it, but he said my legs wouldn't move for some reason. A fella from up in Quebec that likes to hunt with Louis down in New York State, up in Newcomb area, belonged to Newcomb Fishing Game Club with Louis. So anyway, Louis says he brought his brother down. He wanted to hunt deer, but he never hunted any deer before, and he didn't want to get in any trouble. So he says, they put him on a good watch, and he said, now you stay right here, he says, but make sure the deer's got horns. And he says, but don't shoot no does. Okay. So they put that guy on up watch, and he's there. And just shortly after the drive started, there was 2 shots. So they finally got over to the guy and asked him, well, it was him shoot? Yeah, he shot. Oh, what did he shoot? Oh, big deer, big deer, he says. He got about 10 points on him. He says, I shoot once, he says, I'm a miss. And the next time I shoot, he said, I hit him in the same place. Another time, working the canal and the creeks in the Meadowy River area, south of Whitehall, coming back in the rain, cut across underneath through by the south end of the island. As I come underneath the railroad bridge, it rained pretty good, and a bolt of lightning or something hit the railroad or somewheres, and it dropped from that bridge to me, almost knocked me out of the boat. Dogs are generally categorized as working or show or hunting or some other kind of a dog. Well, a lot of them are trained and untrained, and then there's some just plain everyday curs that no good for anything. But anyway, some of the dogs have been trained pretty well, but then other dogs train their masters pretty well. But the most unlikely candidate I ever saw for a retriever was a English bulldog owned by Harrison Bird over to Hewlett's Landing. Well, Harrison owns quite a lot of land over there, and he used to take his dog and walk around the paths and trails there and old wood roads and maybe get a partridge or 2. So he'd take his dog with him, and he didn't care if he got anything or not. He just went for a walk mostly. But anyway, one day a friend of his came up, and they took the little walk around there and got a couple of birds. But the guy had a retriever. Well, they took the retriever along, and Harrison's English bulldog went along with him. They shot a couple of birds, and the retriever brought him right back. Well, that was all right until the next few days. Harrison took his dog and went for a walk up through there, and he got a couple of birds, and each time the English bulldog retrieved them, just the same as the retriever would. Later on, Harrison was sitting in his home over there and looked up the road, and he could see something coming down the road, but couldn't make it out. Got the binoculars, and he couldn't figure out what that thing was. Something was coming down the road, but he couldn't quite make it out. So he figured some kind of exotic animal or something. He had a good chance to get a good picture. So he got his camera out and all fixed and ready to go. So anyway, the thing kept coming closer and closer to the house, and finally didn't pay any attention at home. It just kept coming, and finally Harrison got out there and got a good picture. There's his English bulldog retrieving a porcupine, the only dog I ever heard of that would retrieve a porcupine. And if you don't believe me, go over and take a look at the picture Harrison Bird has still got it. One time, years ago, we're stocking pheasants. And of course, the state of New York, they have you use a boat trailer to stock pheasants. Well, anyway, when you get about 15 or 19 crates that run from 3 to by 4 feet size, and about 8 inches high, balanced on a boat trailer tongue, well, it's quite a trick, all tied on there. You talk about juggling over back roads and everything else. Well, anyway, we'd stocked the pheasants and headed back to down the Greenwich Fairground, dumped up crates off. So going down Ford, just the other side of Fort Ann, we're headed south, and there's a car approaching us and headed north. So that was all right. All of a sudden, the car went down in a ditch on my left-hand side of the road and hit a telephone pole side the car, scrubbed that all along there. And a woman driver, naturally, and she wheeled the car right around and up over the road, right at a 90-degree angle from where she is in the ditch, right across the road in front of me, over across the other ditch, and into a field with a bunch of weeds and burdocks and everything else. About that time she hit the ditch on the other side, the door flew open, and out come a baby, blankets and everything else, and into the brush and weeds. Well, anyway, so I slammed the brakes on, and the other guy and myself jumped out. We run over. But that time the woman got the car under control and stopped there in the field. She ran right around the front of the car and grabbed the blankets and weeds and baby and everything else and picked him right up. I said to her, "Is he hurt?" Nah, she said. "They're kind of pliable at that age." I'd heard about this guy. It was supposed to happen years ago. I don't know. But anyway, seems he was going to go pheasant hunting. And his boss said to him, he said, "You have a dog?" He said, "To hunt with?" And the fellow said, "No." He said, "I just hunt." He says, "I haven't done much of it," he says, "but I kind of like to go out and get around," he says. "You give me any birds?" "No," he said, "I haven't had much luck," he says. So they had a long weekend coming up, and the boss said to him, he said, "I have a nice dog," he says, "that been trained for hunting pheasants." He says, "If you like them," he says, "this weekend," he says, "you're going to go hunting," he said, "I'll let you take the dog." Because he said, "I'm not going to be able to use him." He said, "My wife's got other things planned for me." And every hunter has always got his wife, that's always got something planned for him. And anyway, the guy said, "Okay, thank him," and took the dog. And he hunted all the weekend with him, and he brought the dog back to the guy on Sunday night, and he says, the fellow said, "How'd you make out?" "Ah," he said, "I didn't get anything." "What do you mean?" He says, "The dog didn't put nothing up." "How'd he work?" "Well," he says, "we started out," he said, "in every little way," he said, "he'd stiffen right up." He said, "You could call him and holler and yell and whistle," and he said, "he'd stiffen right up right there." He said, "but 4 or 5 good boots in the rear end finally got him straightened out, and then he come along with me." It's a good thing the Union and the Imperial is stuck up for their men, or that boss would have probably fired that guy. Years ago, I worked with a guy over on Lake George. They had signed me to work with him. He was an ex-Marine, and he had a disposition like a Georgia sheriff. Mean and miserable most of the time. Well, anyway, we were working there, and they caught a guy fishing, no license. And he ran the boat, and I used to have to sign up the guys and get the information and name and address, zip code, and everything else, and write the charges down. And, well, for some reason, this guy and the guy fishing with no license got in a big argument. And they're going at it, jawing at each other back and forth, and mean and miserable, and it blew around there. Well, anyway, finally I said to the guy, "What Marine division were you with?" And he told me the 5th Marines. So I introduced him to the other guy, and I said, oh, so-and-so here was the 4th Marine Division. The fight stopped right away. No more problem. Well, anyway, we got the guy in the court and settled with him. And on the way home, we're riding down the road, and he says, he was a mean son of a gun, wasn't he? I said, yeah, I guess so. So, by the way, he says, how did you know he was in the Marines? Ex-Marine. So I said, well, I'll tell you. You two birds were just like two peas in a pod, a pair of twins, and I knew you didn't know him from before, so I figured he had to be a Marine, because you both had the same kind of a disposition. The guy I've been working with, he was mad at me for 4 or 5 days, and I think he gets mad at me every time he thinks about that ex-Marine we arrested.